Burkina Faso was formerly colonized by France and has an abundance of gold in natural resources. Traoré pushed out Western influence, including the mine owners, who are French mine owners.
Breaking update: France's government is on the verge of collapse and the crisis is shaking Europe to its core. The country is drowning in debt, with a staggering €3.3 trillion deficit that grows by nearly €5,000 every single second. And it's not just France, the United Kingdom is also staring down the same path.
200,000 angry French citizens flooding the streets, blocking highways, torching buses, chanting for Macron's resignation. Why? Because their government just announced a brutal $50 billion budget cut. But here's the twist the French media won't tell you. The deeper cause of this crisis doesn't lie in Paris. It lies in Africa.
And things haven't been going well for the French economy ever since. Just last week, the French Prime Minister resigned because he just couldn't fix the economy. So how did we get here? Well, let's dive in.
Burkina Faso was formerly colonized by France and has an abundance of gold in natural resources. Traoré pushed out Western influence, including the mine owners, who are French mine owners in Burkina Faso. France wanted to reestablish relations with Burkina Faso, and if you've seen Macron giving a pretty ridiculous speech trying to say one day they'll thank us for helping them, no. They just wanted you to leave them alone. Anyway, Traoré said that in order to reestablish relations with France, that France is going to have to return all of the gold that they have stolen from Burkina Faso's mines, and all of this gold that they have is sitting in reserves in France. France is trying to say that that gold is theirs. It comes from mines in France. There are no gold mines in France. So now the US is getting involved. And we can all guess what those claims are going to be. Now we're seeing the claim, oh, he's stealing all the gold for himself and he's not helping his people. The next they're going to be like, we need to bring democracy to Burkina Faso, like those typical things that the US says in order to manufacture consent for invasion and ultimately backing a coup, which I'm sure they have already tried. Them, France, and anybody else who benefits from the gold exploitation of African nations, which includes those fake Muslim countries like the UAE. Hopefully I don't get in trouble for saying that. But there's a reason why a lot of these nations are not coming to the aid of Palestinians and are also thriving off of the exploitation of natural resources from nations in Africa. Anyway, I'm hoping this gets picked up by American TikTok, but we'll see. And as we go along, you're probably going to hear a lot of comparisons of Thomas Sankara to Ibrahim Traoré. Sankara was a leader almost exactly like Traoré around 1970s in Burkina Faso. I have one of his speeches pinned on my profile. I'm going to make a part 2 sharing what I know about Sankara because I understand this is 2 minutes and that might be a little bit too long for people's attention spans.
Breaking update: France's government is on the verge of collapse and the crisis is shaking Europe to its core. The country is drowning in debt, with a staggering €3.3 trillion deficit that grows by nearly €5,000 every single second. And it's not just France, the United Kingdom is also staring down the same path. Here's the part most people don't know. For decades, 14 African nations were forced into an arrangement that sent up to 80% of their yearly revenues straight to France. That deal kept France afloat for over 50 years. But times have changed. Countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, and Senegal have expelled France, cutting off Paris from the very resources that kept its economy stable. Now, the fallout is massive. Companies are leaving France, unemployment is rising, and the state can't keep up with the weight of its own debt. The lifeline from Africa is gone, and with it, France's economic safety net. Meanwhile, the UK still leans heavily on Nigeria, but analysts warn that if Nigeria follows the same path and pushes back, Britain could face a collapse similar to France. What we're seeing right now is Europe paying the price for decades of dependency on Africa. The old system is crumbling and the cracks are finally out in the open. So here's the big question: is this the beginning of Europe's economic downfall, or can these nations survive without Africa's resources?
Join me as I reveal one of the most explosive stories shaking Europe today. Imagine this: 200,000 angry French citizens flooding the streets, blocking highways, torching buses, chanting for Macron's resignation. Why? Because their government just announced a brutal $50 billion budget cut. But here's the twist the French media won't tell you. The deeper cause of this crisis doesn't lie in Paris. It lies in Africa. More specifically, in the Sahel. France is collapsing because it lost its grip on Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. Without Africa, France is bankrupt. Without the Sahel, France is humiliated. Well, Paris, Lyon, Marseille, Toulouse, the streets are on fire. Protesters chant, "Macron must go." A bus torched in Rennes, train cables cut near Toulouse. At Gare du Nord station in Paris, police fired tear gas at thousands of demonstrators blocking entry. 80,000 police officers deployed nationwide, yet still overwhelmed. Nearly 500 people arrested. Over 170,000 people mobilized in more than 800 protests across France. The Block Everything movement, born online, has become a tidal wave of anger sweeping across the country. And the reason? Austerity, cuts, sacrifice demanded of ordinary French people. Prime Minister François Bayrou unveiled a $50 billion cut, slashing pensions, freezing salaries, removing national holidays. The people shouted no. Parliament collapsed in a no-confidence vote. Macron scrambled to appoint yet another prime minister. But the anger only grew. And that's just the beginning. Because here's what France doesn't want to admit. These budget cuts are not simply about mismanagement. They are about the collapse of France's colonial empire in Africa. They are about the loss of Niger's uranium, Mali's gold, Burkina Faso's cotton. They are about the end of French domination in the Sahel. Keep watching, because it gets deeper. For decades, French presidents boasted that without Africa, France would sink to the rank of a third world country. That wasn't just a statement. It was an admission of dependency. Africa's uranium lit French homes. Africa's oil fueled French cars. Africa's resources filled French banks. And yet Africa itself remained poor. That was the Africa versus France economy. Paris shining, Niamey starving. But everything changed when the Sahel rose. In Mali, Colonel Assimi Goïta ended military cooperation with France. In Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traoré expelled French troops and reclaimed control of supply chains. In Niger, General Abdourahmane Chiani nationalized uranium, expelled Orano, and joined the alliance of Sahel states. These were not isolated acts. They were a coordinated rebellion against centuries of French colonization in Africa, and the results speak for themselves. The World Bank Niger report shocked the world when it projected that Niger will be the fastest growing economy in Africa in 2025, with an incredible 14.4% GDP growth. Agriculture is booming thanks to massive irrigation. Oil production has quadrupled. Uranium is finally under Nigerian control. While France is slashing $50 billion from its budget, Niger is rising. While Macron faces 200,000 protesters in Paris, Chiani commands millions cheering in Niamey. France shamed, Niger triumphant. But there's something the media isn't telling you. France's $50 billion budget hole has a direct link to Africa. With the Sahel cutting off cheap uranium, cheap gold, cheap cotton, France's energy bills are soaring, its industries are weakening, and its debt is spiraling. In 2024, France's deficit hit 5.8% of GDP. Now austerity is the only answer. Yet the people are refusing to pay the price for Macron's colonial failures. This is where Niger sends the world a message. When Africa breaks free, Europe shakes. When the Sahel rises, Paris trembles. Like this video, if you feel what's coming is long overdue, and you won't believe what happens next. Because this is no longer just about the streets of France. It is about a shift in global power. The Sahel rising shows that Africa's fastest growing economies are no accident. They are the fruit of resistance. Resistance to IMF debt traps. Resistance to French colonization. Africa, resistance to puppet leaders. When Niger breaks free from France, France breaks down at home. Comment below, because the next piece needs your voice. If you believe Africa must rise, comment, Africa must rise. If you stand with AES, say it loud, AES forever. Now let us paint the contrast even more vividly. In Paris, pensioners march because their retirement is threatened. In Niamey, families celebrate cheaper rice, regulated rents, and free maternal health care introduced by the military government. In Lyon, students clash with police over tuition hikes. In Ouagadougou, young people cheer as Traoré opens new state-owned enterprises. In Marseille, unions strike against frozen wages. In Bamako, Goïta signs new defense pacts with Russia and Turkey. Two worlds, one falling, one rising. Which side of history do you stand on? And that's not all. The Sahel's victory is contagious. Senegal, under Bassirou Diomaye Faye, is following the same anti-imperialist path. Its economy is projected to grow 12.1% in 2025. Ghana debates taking back control of its gold exports. Across Africa, the message is spreading. If Niger can do it, why not us? If Mali can do it, why not us? If Burkina Faso can stand tall, then surely Africa as a whole can rise. But the question is, will France learn, or will it double down on?
After several African nations kicked France out of their countries, France is falling apart. Now, you probably remember in the past couple of years, many African countries have been kicking the French out of their countries. Now, these included countries like Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. And things haven't been going well for the French economy ever since. Just last week, the French Prime Minister resigned because he just couldn't fix the economy. So how did we get here? Well, let's dive in. Now, in the late 1900s, many European countries started to leave Africa after they had controlled and colonized it for a couple of hundreds of years. But not France. France left, but only in name. In reality, France was still running things and they still kept control of all of these West African countries. France still controlled 14 countries in Africa. Now, so what France was doing here was that they signed agreements with governments of these countries, either through bribery or through negotiation without actually exposing the downsides of the agreement. So negotiating in bad faith. So this agreement said that these countries needed to keep most of their reserves in the French currency and it needs to be kept in France. And also, now the central bank that ran the currencies of all of these countries had a French representative who had a veto power. Now this means that these countries couldn't make decisions of their own long-term investments because France will always have a veto power to say, no, I don't think you should do that. Now this includes investments inside their own country. So if they wanted to build a road, they wanted to build schools, they couldn't just access their reserves because their reserves, more than half of them, 65%, were kept in France. Now, when the France defend themselves, they said that this benefited these countries because their currencies didn't fluctuate because their currencies were linked to the franc. But this also meant that if things are going bad in France, the currencies of these countries also lose value, which meant that any bad decision that France does will definitely have huge consequences on the currencies and the economies of these countries. So in a nutshell, these countries were propping up the French economy. Now, on top of that, France was also taking a large amount of resources. So 30% of France's uranium that it used to produce electricity was mined in Niger. But more than 90% of the people in Niger didn't even have electricity. Now, there were also mining companies that were coming from France, digging up the gold and buying it at a very cheap amount because remember, they maintained their control of the value of the currency between the franc and those countries' currencies. And then they will take them and then sell them at a higher price to the rest of the world. Now, starting about 5 to 6 years ago, there started to be a resistance in these countries. That's when military coups came in. That's when we saw the rise of people like Ibrahim Traoré and other leaders around the region. Now, these leaders, when they came in, they cancelled most of these contracts. But on top of that, they removed that veto power that allowed France to veto anything that these countries wanted to do economically. Now, this came with a huge burden on the French economy. So starting from 2022, when they started to see that the show is about to end, they started to put in measures to try to prop up their own economy. Now, the other problem they have is that most Western countries, including those in Europe, those in Asia, like Japan, South Korea, and also the United States, they have an aging population. This means that there's a lot of people who are about to go on retirement, and there's no one who's going to come and replace those people in the job market. Now, this is very bad because when you retire, you're no longer producing anything that helps the country, but at least there will be someone who comes in and take on your place, who will be taxed, and that tax money will be used to prop up the economy, to build roads that you are going to use, even though you're no longer contributing to the economy. This includes your retirement. So the money that gets deducted from your account is not being stored in a single account and then when you retire, they're going to take it and give it to you. It's being used for investment. It's being used to build things. And the process here is that when it's your time to retire, the money will be taken from those who are going to be working at that time and it should be used to pay you off when you retire and cash out. But the problem in many Western countries is that many people are about to retire, but there's no people who are going to come in and replace them. That's why those countries had to seek out workers from Asia and Africa. That's why you saw a lot of people who migrated overseas to go there and work, including me. It's because they're trying to replace aging population. So France has the same problem. So what they did is that the first step that they did, I think it was 2022 or 2023, they came out and they said that they're going to rise the age of retirement. So instead of retiring at 60, they increased it to retiring at 62. That means that they have delayed the amount of time that they need to cash out those people who are retiring. And also, they're adding 2 more years to those people who are working to add more value into the economy and contribute. They also increased it from that to 64, but that will only be implemented, I think, in 2030. So as you can see, they're trying to solve the problems, but that wasn't enough. France also have a very huge deficit. This means that the amount of money that they are collecting from tax is less than the amount that they are spending in the public spending, things like schools, roads, administration, and all of those other things that the governments need to do. So what do? They borrow. And now France also has the highest borrowing in Europe. So they've been borrowing a large amount of money, and it's becoming very difficult now to pay back that money back. On top of that, because of all of these problems, France's credit rating has lowered, which means that now whenever they go to borrow, they're going to have to pay even more money. So what they did is they came with a plan. The plan included removing 2 holidays. They are saying that we have 2 holidays, we need to remove them. People need to be working on those holidays. That will produce more money for the economy, and we can use it to reduce the amount of debt. People were having none of that. They were like, no, they're not going to take away my holidays. Just think as a South African, for example, if they say June 16th is being taken away, 1st of May is being taken away, definitely you will have something to say about that and you won't be happy. Now, on top of that, they're saying that they're going to cut public spending. The money that is being spent on welfare, the money that is paid to people who are like old or people who are unable to work for themselves, they want to cut that. And people are not happy about it, so they came out. So the Prime Minister went to Parliament and said, guys, this is the plan. This is how we're gonna do it. Who is agreeing with me? Who's not agreeing with me? And then he challenged them to a vote of no confidence, in which he lost, and then he was removed. So that's how bad things are in France right now. The economy is not doing well. They don't have a way out. People are angry. People are resisting, but something has to be done. It's either you need to cut on the spending, or you need to increase tax, or you need to work more. It's one of those. There's no other way. So we're gonna see how people are gonna react, and I'll keep you updated on this story. If you like this kind of story, please repost this video. Just go there on the share and then press repost. And then to support me, go to my YouTube channel and subscribe, and I'm gonna see you there.